Hey there, I'm John Keneally. I am a project manager for MasterCard by trade. And if you're watching or listening to this, you may already be aware that I run a meetup group and a podcast called Young Leaders in Tech. This lightning talk is one I gave at a conference recently for students in Ireland called the SISTEM Conference. I was giving them some of the information around how I went about setting up my meetup and podcast and how they could do it themselves. This information is very transferable, so it could be useful for anyone else out there who is looking to get into creating their own content. So for anyone who's listening on the podcast, you may be interested in checking this out on my website or YouTube channel, where you can have a look at the slides as well as, because they support the talk somewhat. Links to that should be in the show notes if you're on the podcast. First things first was the naming of the podcast or meetup. One thing you might not think about when you're naming the podcast is that whatever name you come up with might have a limiting factor on it, something that makes people think it's not targeted for them. So before we get started, I'm going to leave this quote here. Anyone who stops learning is old, whether at 20 or 80. Anyone who keeps learning stays young. The greatest thing in life is to keep your mind young. So this one is a popular one from Henry Ford. And it's the answer I've had to give a few times to people who have asked me the age criteria for my meetup. They see young leaders in tech and assume it's based on their age. That's not the case at all, and this is the quote that I usually paraphrase when they ask me that. So the very first podcast I did was with a couple of people who are experts in storytelling. The first lesson they taught me was to not rely on your slides to provide the information you need to get across. The other main thing that they taught me was the technique of why, how, and what. You will want to be able to answer these questions about whatever topic you're trying to start this for. If you can answer these, then how are your listeners or viewers supposed to understand? So you start off with the why, your purpose. Why do you want to do this? Then you'll move on to the how. What actions can you make your why a reality? How can you do it? Then you'll finish with the what. What do you do? This is going to be the result of the why. I'll speak on these and what mine were next. So we're going to start with the why. What is your cause, your purpose? Why are you doing this podcast? Why do you want to start a meetup? What is it you want the listeners to learn or find out about? You have the obvious things. You want to become a better presenter, building your self-confidence, which, by the way, in any professional environment are a huge bonus. But then you've got the networking aspect, but there's a lot of other things that you may not think about when you're starting down this path. Do you want to become a subject matter expert in an area? Do you know very little about a topic? Would you like to learn a bit more? I've learned very quickly that I know very little about the things I've been asking my speakers, but it's your questions and the way that you ask them that will both inform you and your listeners, and in turn help everyone learn more about the topic you're talking about. So my reason? About 80% of it was kind of all of the above. And the other 20% was a form of jealousy. So a friend of mine had started their own meetup called Indie Hackers, which is sponsored by Stripe. And as a result of this, he got to interview the Collison brothers. I was thinking, while watching it, I was like, I could do this. I want to get to talk to people like this. But the problem was, I wasn't particularly adept at anything in general. Basically, I know a bit about a lot of things, but not a lot about anything. What I did know is that I was trying to move into a leadership role in my job and become a team lead, but I didn't know how to get there. So I needed some advice and tips. But any course I found or events around leadership were super expensive. So that's what made me start mine. Next, how? How do you do it? How do you, for want of a better word, manifest your why? How do you make it happen? So this is the bare minimum what you need to get started. You need mixing decks, screens, laptops, the whole... No, joking. That's no word. You need a computer, phone, anything, access to the internet and a way of recording your voice. That's pretty much it. A lot of you may already have headphones with good speakers in them. I've got my Bose that I was using at the start for a couple of meetups. They were fine. I did get a microphone early on, and the Blue Snowball that suits me perfectly for exactly what I want. One thing to note, some people might be surprised about this, is that, and you'll learn it the hard way, is to avoid Apple products for microphones at the moment anyways. They have really good sound quality, some of them, but their microphone quality is just not up to scratch, and you'll spend an infuriating amount of time trying to edit out the harsh S sounds from your audio files. It's not a fun thing to do. So next, like if you were to look on Google, if you were just to search how to become a podcaster, you'd get loads and loads of results saying use this product, that product, this product, you need to stream with this product. Now, these Restream, StreamYard, Wirecast, I've used all of these to various levels of success. But Audacity is probably the only ones of these that I've actually continued to use because it is really useful for editing audio and it's free. It's great. So the basics of what you need, apart from all these, is a Zoom account, essentially. When you record a meeting in Zoom, it saves as a video with audio and an audio file separately. It's great. It's really good quality. Takes very little effort after that to have your recording ready. If you are running on lack of computers, if you don't have editing software, you get the split audio file from Zoom and you can just trim the ends of the audio file on your WhatsApp or Telegram or wherever you have messages. So this leads me on to the next section of the how, and that's how to not get knocked down when things don't go your way. So how to not get stopped by problems, essentially. When I started the meetups, I reached out to some hotels and bars to see if they had a function room. I chose Tuesdays as that was the day the room is most likely to be empty, and that was the day that people are least likely to have other plans, so they could come along to my meetup. What I didn't know was that Tuesdays seemed to be the days with the most weather warnings in Dublin, or in Ireland, so that's what it seemed to me anyways. My first meetup had 3 people. That jumped to 5 for number 2, and then I had a red weather warning for number 3. So big storm. I was sitting in the bar with nobody had arrived 20 minutes in, so I had to obviously cancel it at that stage. But the important thing is to not let that get in your way, not to let it knock you down. So in order to protect myself against the Irish weather, I started to stream the videos, the meetups, to Instagram first and then to LinkedIn. But this obviously brought the possibility of more problems. This meetup here, meetup number 8, it was a great meetup in the Bank of Ireland studio in Trinity, which, by the way, is another free venue you can book. You can find a lot of free venues. If you just go to Meetup in your local area, check what groups are meeting up, see where they're meeting up. Are they meeting up in restaurants, bars? There's a good chance that where they're meeting up was free to them. So you can reach out to the same venue and see if they'll host your meetup for you. So back to this, this one was the first one that I streamed to LinkedIn. The Instagram Live was fine, but you don't want someone to be staring at a small phone screen trying to pick out who's speaking for an hour. So I wanted to scale it up, get it onto desktops, and so I set up the live stream, practiced it a load of times, set up a Twitch account that nobody was looking at, just sending the stream to Twitch, just to make sure the sound and everything was working. Previous night, everything was working great. Meetup was really entertaining. Everything got recorded, and then I go onto my laptop afterwards and I see this in the comments. No sound. Great. These things happen, unfortunately. Luckily, in this case, I had a backup plan in place. I had a dictaphone recording in the room, which is very useful, by the way, and I was able to use this as the sound to the video. So it's always good, obviously, to have a contingency plan. But again, through all these difficulties, once you persevere and keep going, you'll eventually end up with a finished product, something that you've created and something that you can be proud of. So that brings us to the what of this whole thing. What is your product? What is it that you've done? It's one thing to make sure you're not locked into one idea. Make sure you're able to change your plans or your product if some part of it isn't working. For me, I started out thinking that a bunch of people who are on the same boat as me, who wanted to discuss how we can become managers, how we can become team leads, would just sit in a room and talk about it. Looking back, obviously, that was not the right path. And as I'm saying it now, it sounds stupid. But you don't know that at the time. You only learn these things as you go. So it took me inviting one of my former co-workers along. I knew she was good at public speaking and had been a panelist at a number of conferences previously. So I asked her to come along, and she gave some great advice to the people attending, and she was already a leader in her field. It was the success of this meetup, the one on the top left here, that I realized that this should be the structure of my meetups going forward. Panel discussions with people who have the experience in what we're trying to learn. It's obvious to me now, but some of these things may not be obvious to you at the time. So again, you need to be okay with a change in your plans if a better solution presents itself. And then COVID happened. Just as I had my biggest turnout for an event, we went into lockdown, and a meetup that I had planned for the end of April last year obviously couldn't happen. So I had to pivot quickly and make it virtual. In my head, all along, I kind of knew that I should have been doing a podcast, but I never had the necessity to do one as the meetups are going so well. Once COVID hit, I had no real excuse. I had to head straight into it. So I had a list of contacts that I had built up from my meetups, and I started reaching out. Now, one slight segue here. Keep a spreadsheet of everything you do. Google Sheets, whatever your spreadsheet forms are. Keep your speakers, their contact info, when you reached out to them. Did they respond? Did they say yes? Did they say no? Any emails you've sent, save the text from the emails. You can use those again. Like, it's the hardest part about this whole thing is actually reaching out to people. So if you've all this prep work done so that reaching out is simple, you can just keep doing it easily, and you can send them really nice, well-written emails with informative stuff about your podcast because you've saved it previously. There's really useful stuff, and having everything saved in one place makes it so much easier. So back to the speakers. Some of the speakers I had on for panel discussions earlier in my meetup had speciality areas they were trained in and made them perfect for the podcast. Others I found simply by hearing them on a different stream and dropping them a message on LinkedIn or Instagram. You'd be surprised how many people want to join you on a podcast to talk about what they're passionate about. Don't be afraid to reach out, really. Like, the worst they can say is no. I would advise, though, do start small. Don't, not too small, but don't go for your idols first. Don't be reaching out to the Bill Gates and Elon Musks before you even get some practice and experience. Look for people in your company, lecturers in nearby universities. These people are usually all glad to help. Then, once you've refined your process, gone through a few iterations to figure out what's the best way of asking questions, what's the best way of formatting the event, then you can start reaching out to the more elusive speakers. Also, as I said earlier, if you're part of any company, if you're in university or close to university, or you used to go to a university or college or school, you may be able to get some funding for like event spaces or finger food, small things that will entice people. My company, MasterCard, were really supportive of me from the very start and helped me to get the word out as well. And they also gave me some help to buy food at some of the events when I needed it. It can really never hurt to ask. So at the end of the day, you are also the wash. You are going to be the glue that holds whatever you come up with together. You are the driving force behind whatever podcast or meetup you come up with. And you should make people know who you are. Make sure that they know who you are. Don't be afraid to let people know what you do, your background, what made you decide to go down this road you're on. Tell people in your company. Tell people where you work. Tell your friends. Some of them might not like it. Some of them won't listen to it. Don't get offended by that. It might not be for everyone. But just let them know about it. It can't hurt. So with that in mind, I'm going to do my own shameless plug, and I'm going to leave this here. This is links to all of my pages. If you're starting down this route, do give me a shout. Like, you can reach out to me on any of these links. I'll have them in the show notes below as well. I'd be glad to help out with tips I've had so far. Other stuff to this. If you found this useful, I have other information as well. Some of the recording software I've used. Feel free to help reach out. You can connect me on LinkedIn as well, and don't be afraid to drop me a message. Cheers, that's all from me. Thanks, folks. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you found that this has helped you in any way and might help someone else, it'd be great if you could like, subscribe and share it on any of the social medias you're involved on. We do have a website at youngleaders.tech where you can find links to all of our social media accounts. There you can also listen back to other podcasts, meetup recordings, and have a look at our reading list, where we have a list of books, podcasts and blogs that have been recommended by our speakers. I'm always looking for new speakers as well, so there's a contact form on the website where you can send speaker recommendations if you know of anyone that would be suitable. Again, thanks for listening, and I hope you come back to the next episode.